All right, let's take a little tour to China. And I want you to label this Confucianism and the Mandate of Heaven. All right. Some notes are going to be found in yellow, some in black. And again, you're going to put your answers to the questions on a separate sheet. You've probably seen this tomb. This is the tomb of Shi Huangdi, one of the greatest emperors of China. Probably one of the greatest. I mean, he's the true epitome of a gangster. All right. We'll get back to you on that though. China, sometimes called the Middle Kingdom, they thought that they were literally the middle of the world, that the world centered around them. Um, that's what Chung Kwao means, Middle Kingdom. Okay, just like all the other civilizations, they had advanced cities, um, specialized workers. Hey, take a look at this in terms of the specialized workers. Peasants are right here in the center. All right, you know, not down here. They're above merchants, above even soldiers. Okay, peasants. All right, if you produce the food, we got to give you respect. That's the way they lived it. All right, the writing. Now, writing is going to work a little bit different in China than it did in Mesopotamia and Egypt. They use something called pictographs, and these pictographs, um, basically, whatever you wanted to say, it kind of looked like what you wanted to say. I mean, look at this horse. Now, over the years, this is one of the oldest written languages in the world, because it still continues. I mean, look at this. This is a horse in old Chinese language. All right, and then as they, over the time, they kind of modernized and got things a little better. But you still see a horse, right? I mean, that is still, in essence, a horse. I mean, can you still see it today? I mean, this is what that symbol would look like now. I mean, it looks like a horse to me. Now, the cool thing about their language was the written language can be understood by all, no matter what dialect of Chinese you speak, because they got many different dialects of Chinese. No matter what dialect you speak, the written language was the same. All right, so that's going to play a huge role in unifying China, at least culturally. All right, if you were to read this, you would start over here, work your way down, back up, boom, boom, sort of the opposite of us. Okay, let's take a look at them geographically. All right, now the wonderful thing about China, in some sense, they were isolated um, by these Himalaya mountains and the Gobi Desert. All right, but there are two major rivers, one of them being the Yellow River, flooded all the time, and while that helped the land around it, it's also much of the land was totally unsuitable for farming. All right, and by that, that's going to make conflict. All right, you don't have enough farmland for everybody, so conflict is going to ensue. And that sets up something we call the dynastic cycle. Okay, they're going to have 24 different families of rulers. All right, 24 of them. That's a lot of different families. Okay, the dynastic cycle. We're going to talk a little bit about the dynastic cycle. Um, the dynastic cycle centers around this idea called the mandate of heaven. All right, and the mandate of heaven worked like this: as long as the ruler is doing what he needs to do, um, the people are happy because he's pleasing the gods. But the people will know when he's not pleasing the gods, because disasters will begin to set in. All right, and once disasters like floods, war, whatever it is, that means that he's lost his mandate and it's time to overthrow that ruler. And then a new dynasty steps in and begins a whole new mandate. All right, one of the early claimers of the mandate are going to be the Zhao dynasty. All right, and they're going to use feudalism to kind of set things off. Feudalism is where the king sort of breaks off a piece of his land and he gives it down to his cousins and who are nobles. Then they give it off to some of their lesser cousins, and and they keep breaking the land up, and then everybody kicks something back. You got to kick something back up to the king. All right, during this time, they're going to use coin money and they're going to produce iron. Now, one of the more lasting effects, though, is this whole thing called ancestor worship, um, where the ancestors, that is, your loved ones who have gone on, you continually pay them respect because they're your link to the gods. Like I said, live by the sword, die by the sword, and the Zhao dynasty most certainly did that. It's going to crash and burn around 226 BCE, and once they lose their mandate, it begins this whole thing called the spring and autumn period, or warring states period. And basically what you're going to have is a bunch of local kings, kind of warlords, just parading around saying I'm in charge, and they're going to constantly stab each other in the back trying to take over from each other. Causes a whole lot of confusion, and enters a young man named Confucius. Confucius is going to come about, and I mean, he is probably going to be one of the greatest philosophers in the world. All right, I mean, you can just see how smart he is by looking at that smile. Look at him. All right, look like a professor. Now, Confucius comes up with this idea. He had a few really good ideas, but one of them was he wanted to base relationships around respect. So a citizen would pay respect to the ruler. Sounds basic enough. All right. A son would pay respect to his father. A wife owes respect to her husband. Younger sibling to older sibling. All right. Now, friend to friend would be equal if they're about the same age. Okay. But basically, it works like this. Respect would be centered around age and sex. That is, the oldest male is always going to rule. Now, there were other ethical systems of that day. All right. Make sure you get this part in yellow about Confucianism. All right. There was Taoism. All right. Which kind of, was about the natural order of things. It's going to be popular for a little while, but not nearly as popular as Confucianism. And then there was legalism. There's been a lot of rulers in China that liked legalism because, just read it. You can see why. Basically, you mess with me as I'm the king and I make a rule, and you try to even say something remotely that sounds like a criticism, off with your head. Legalism. Okay, but of all these, Confucianism is going to have the greatest impact, and not just inside of China, throughout all of Asia. All right, answer these couple of questions. Now, then we get to the period of warring states. Okay, same thing as spring and autumn. All right, get all these kingdoms I mentioned before fighting each other: the Qin, the Wei, the Zhao, the Yan, the Chu. All of these kingdoms are fighting for control of China. Well, one is going to emerge as the one. All right, this is actually where China gets its name from, the Qin dynasty.
Long ago, a mythic battle between good and evil played out in ancient China. The country was torn by civil war, with many kingdoms struggling for land and power. But one king had a ruthless ambition to make himself emperor by the sword.
Qi Huang Di.
The other rulers hired assassins to kill the king before he could conquer them all.
Don't mess with Shin Wan Di. You know he a bad son of a gun. Look at him, he ain't even broke a sweat yet. Never blink.
Kingdom by kingdom, his army swept away everything in its path, and anyone who resisted met a terrible fate. The country was his. He was now emperor of all under heaven.
Bad Mother Hubbard.
He enslaved his conquered enemies and forced them to build his great wall. When they were dead or useless, he had them buried beneath it.
Woo! Shi Huangdi united all of China. All right, bad Joker there. Now he's going to maintain his power by centralizing control, and what he's going to do is force all the noble families to live in the capital city under his watch. All right, and notice here, he hated Confucianism as a philosophy. He hated it. Tried to have all the Confucian monks killed, burned all the books. You know, I mean, he was in control, and that was what it was going to be. All right, Shi Huangdi. Now, of course, he went for immortality. You know, he thought he could live forever. Drank some kind of magic potion, whatever. Boom. Didn't know it was laced with. Didn't know it had mercury in it. Wound up killing himself with that potion. Lost his mandate. And you know what happens when you lose your mandate. Time for a new ruler. And here comes the Han Dynasty. Now the Han Dynasty, unlike any other one, this is going to be the golden age. This is going to be when China is going to be at its greatest height. All right, the golden age of China from 206. This is 400 years of just greatness. Everything you can think of is going to be invented during this time period. Look at this. All of these farming improvements led to creating a larger population. If you got a larger population, you got more specialized workers. If you got more specialized workers, then you can invent new stuff. Paper, they expand education, the silk mills are going, you're conquering new lands. They set up this whole examination system to make government work better. We still use it now. You want a job at the post office, you gotta take a test. Want to work as a policeman, gotta take a test. That's where that comes from. Before Confucius, you just had to know somebody. Now he comes up with, later on they come up with the Silk Roads. And the Silk Roads work like this. Basically, silk was in high demand over here in Rome, and so major roads coming out of China, there were two of them. And notice one of them goes through the Gupta Empire. The Indians were sort of middlemen, and they made a lot of money just being middlemen here. So kind of trafficking the Chinese silk over here to the Romans made them rich. All right. Now I want you to give me one ruler that you would like to live under, but have two reasons why. All right, two reasons to support your thoughts. Y'all know who that is, right?
Bruce, Bruce.